Thank you, Judy, and good afternoon to everyone. The meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure will now come to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Here.
Chairman Ro Moreno.
And I am here. And all our members are present. Thank you so much for the accommodations of starting a little early. We are at that time of the session where things are going to get a little crazy. So on Thursday, we will start at our regular committee time, but both next Tuesday and Thursday, we will start at 1 p.m. And we will have a special meeting on Friday, the 9th, just for a work session to make sure that we get as much work as we can finished to get them out of our committee in time. So members, you can make adjustments to your calendars, and those that are following us virtually, you'll know what's coming up for the next week. Today, we will be hearing two bill drafts, and both of the bills are going to be presented by our Vice Chair Watts. We'll start with Assembly Bill 349, and I will invite the Assemblyman to the floor. The floor is yours with your co-presenters for Assembly Bill 349.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It is my honor to be presenting bills for you today and what I will call State Climate Strategy Day in the Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. For the record, I am Howard Watts representing District 15 in Clark County. I am glad to present Assembly Bill 349 for your consideration today. The primary focus of this bill is to reduce vehicle pollution in our state, but it will deliver benefits to our climate, our health, and our economy along the way. I'm glad to be joined today by Tom Knox of Valley Can, and Mr. Knox will present, I think, an interesting case study for everyone after I give my initial remarks and a brief overview of the bill itself. Before I go into the components of the bill, I want to provide a little bit of background about why reducing vehicle pollution is important. The American Lung Association's State of the Air report routinely gives Clark, Washoe, and Lyon counties failing grades for smog pollution and ranks our metro area among some of the dirtiest in the country. Smog is closely linked to vehicle emissions, and it's also a risk factor for asthma, COPD, cancer, and even cognitive decline. The legacy of segregation and the discriminatory location of freeways over the decades means that these pollution levels are often far higher for communities of color and for lower income neighborhoods. Vehicle pollution is also the top source of pollution contributing to climate change in Nevada, according to the latest greenhouse gas inventory compiled by the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. For us to meet our goals of reducing and eliminating these emissions over the next 30 years, and we have set a policy goal to reach net zero emissions by 2050, we have to take action right now to transform our transportation systems. It's also worth noting that the higher temperatures that are contributed by climate change are also linked to the formation of smog, and that other impacts of climate change, including excessive heat, are also felt first and foremost by historically marginalized communities. To tackle this, the state climate strategy, which was released at the end of last year, looked in depth at 5 potential policies to reduce vehicle pollution. One of those policy concepts was to close loopholes in our emissions inspection system. Another was to implement a financial incentive to replace older polluting vehicles with cleaner personal transportation. AB 349 seeks to do both of these things. It also includes other policies intended to provide consumer relief and economic stimulus. In short, the goal is to tune up our smog check system and reduce emissions in our state. And the bottom line of the outcomes that this bill is seeking is improved health, environmental, and financial outcomes, and a reduction of historical disparities. With that, I'll walk you through the provisions of the bill and provide some additional context for each. Sections 1 through 4 of the bill close the so-called classic car loophole. Each section deals with a different plate: classic rod, classic vehicle, and old timer. Section 2 deals with street rods, which were built before 1949, but that should not have been included in the bill, so we're going to be modifying that. These other designations have a rolling basis of model year 20, 25, or 40 model years old or older. That means that currently any model year 2001 vehicle is potentially eligible for classic rod plates. Now, all of these plates are intended for collectors and hobbyists. You can think of things in particular like hot August nights when we think about classic vehicles. However, after the laws were last modified in 2011, the hope was that we would keep our policy to support those vehicles, which there were about that were registered with those designations in about 2011. To try and make sure that those plates are only eligible for classic vehicles, a 5,000 mile a year limit was put on to exclude daily drivers, our everyday commute and work vehicles. Unfortunately, that $5,000 mile a year requirement is self-reported, and there's a lack of capacity for additional enforcement. And that quickly led to an explosion in the numbers of these plates, from a fairly steady 5,000 to more than 32,000 registrations today over the span of the last decade. And why is that? Well, one of the draws to this program has been the fact that vehicles with these designations are exempt from annual smog checks. And I think I can speak for many members of the public who I've gotten emails from, as well as many of the members of this committee, when I say it's common now to see vehicles that are clearly used for daily commutes, either as commuter vehicles or work vehicles, that sport these classic designation plates. AB 349 looks to close these loopholes by clarifying that any vehicle getting one of these classic plates should specifically be for occasional driving and special events, not general transportation. It'll also require classic vehicles to hold classic vehicle insurance policies. These policies generally require the holders to have a primary vehicle, to follow and report on mileage restrictions, to keep the vehicle protected and in good condition, and to get an appraisal to set a mutually agreed upon value for the vehicle. In addition, they must annually pay to the DMV a fee equal to what they contribute from a smog check to support emissions reduction programs. And I'll go a little bit more into those programs shortly. So that's how we're looking to close the classic car loophole. Sections 6, 7, and 8 of the bill modernize our smog check system itself. In the research, and I've been working on this policy idea for many months now, and in conversations with the industry, I learned that if a technician works for a company with multiple stations, they must be licensed to work at each individual station. Section 6 and 7 are aimed to streamline that so that once licensed, a technician can station. I also met with HEAT, a subsidiary of Parsons that has developed emission detection and reporting, or EDAR technology. And while they're not co-presenting with me, I believe you'll hear from them in support today. This technology allows special cameras to be mounted over roadways, which can see and measure the actual exhaust coming out of vehicles. They could also record the plate for the vehicle, allowing for remote drive-by emissions checks. Similar technology has been deployed as an option for consumers in other states across the region and the country, including Arizona and Colorado. But one particular highlight of this EDAR technology is its ability to be deployed overhead instead of at tailpipe level, which means they can measure emissions on any vehicle, including large trucks where the smokestacks are located on top. Section 8 of this bill authorizes the DMV to establish this remote sensing as an optional alternative that drivers could sign up for instead of the regular option of driving into an emissions check station. Such an arrangement, if the DMV developed these regulations, would also ensure that the state has access to that aggregated data collected on roadways from the deployment of these cameras to help better inform our understanding of vehicle pollution and our pollution reduction initiatives. Section 9 of the bill changes the exemption for new vehicles to get smog from the first 2 years of the vehicle's life to the first 4 years. A little bit of background on this. In 2015, the legislature passed AB 146, originally a proposal to modify our smog fees and inspection schedule. The bill instead led to an in-depth study of our emissions program. And that study concluded that we have the most rigorous smog testing schedule in the West, and that reducing the test frequency could free up millions of dollars in consumer spending each year with minimal impacts on emissions due to the low failure rate of new vehicles. The study suggested a 4-year exemption period for new vehicles, followed by biannual testing through the vehicle's 10th year. Other states do have biennial testing. For the sake of simplicity, this bill only includes the 4-year exemption. And the study also, I'll note, called for closing the classic car loophole. And it was really this report that started my work on AB 349. One thing I'll note really briefly here, you'll hear from some folks in the industry who have concerns about this, and I appreciate them bringing those to me, as I am going to make a few changes, mostly technical in nature, to the bill. I will be considering potential modification to the additional 2 years. And just to be clear, right now, a new vehicle is exempt from a smog for the first 2 years. Under this proposal in AB 349, it would be the first 4 years as written. Section 9 also makes a change to the smog waiver program. If you invest in repairs to your vehicle and it still fails a smog check, you can receive a 1-year waiver from the DMV. Clark and Washoe counties each have different amounts set in regulation that have to be spent on a repair in order to qualify for the waiver if you still cannot pass an emissions check. This bill as written would require that repairs be conducted at a licensed facility no matter where you are in the state. Currently, Clark County requires all repairs to happen in a licensed station. Washoe County allows self-repair. In conversations with folks, I realized that we want to support the right to repair. So I'm intending to amend this to allow people to make their own repairs if they have the skills and ability to do so. Because once those repairs are made, a vehicle still has to be brought into the DMV for inspection and sign off that they were made properly before a waiver could be issued. And I appreciate folks for bringing that to my attention. Finally, Section 10. Whenever a smog check is conducted in the state, $6 is transmitted to the state's pollution control account. This account funds DMV and the Division of Environmental Protection's activities related to running our emissions or smog program, as well as Clark and Washoe counties' initiatives to reduce vehicle emissions and improve air quality within their airsheds. The counties have broad statutory authority already to implement any programs that will help us meet our clean air targets. As I was doing research, I found multiple efforts in previous legislative sessions to double this fee to $12, particularly as attempts were made to modify the emissions testing schedule. The AB 146 report I referenced from 2016 recommended an adjustment to $7.75 to keep the account whole as changes to the testing schedule were made. Also, I did the math, and if we adjusted this fee just for inflation, since it was last changed in 2003, 18 years ago, the amount would be about $8.50 today. AB 349, as proposed, would adjust this figure by $4 from currently to $10, and to adjust the license for each smog station from $25 a year to $150 a year. That would bring in more than $3 million to the pollution control account each year to help support our air quality programs. And I want to speak specifically why I believe this provision is so important. As I noted before, lower income communities disproportionately suffer from poor air quality. Their economic situation often pushes them to pursue classic plates as the least expensive option to get by, which, aside from the pollution impacts, leaves folks with vehicles that are more expensive to fuel, more expensive to maintain. Pushing folks out of those designations without some assistance in place isn't just. I've had conversations with Clark and Washoe counties about establishing repair and replace programs that would help people make the repairs they need if they can't afford to fix their smog non-compliant vehicles or access newer, cleaner transportation. This would promote equity and close disparities as we tackle the health and climate issues. And it would have the added benefit of supporting our local repair shops and auto sales, both new and used. So I believe that the provisions of this bill provide a win all around. And to provide a look at how this repair and replace program would work in action, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Knox to share a real example from a nearby community. Mr. Knox, please proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair and members, and big thanks to Vice Chair Watts for a very thoughtful approach to this very important issue. I'm Tom Knox. I'm with Valley Clean Air Now. We're a nonprofit based in California's San Joaquin Valley, the region with some of the worst air quality and most severe poverty in the United States. Our main target is older gross polluting vehicles, which 2 to 3% of these vehicles in regular use in California are responsible for 30% or more of the total vehicle emissions in California. So to repair or replace these cars, which are mainly used by low-income drivers in the most air-impacted communities, is a very direct and cost-efficient way to produce immediate and quantifiable emissions reductions where they're needed most. We developed the Tune-In, Tune-Up smog repair program, which is funded by the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, to encourage low-income drivers to voluntarily repair their older, high-polluting cars. The program is open to anyone who needs smog repairs and drives in the San Joaquin Valley. It's very open and inclusive, very community-driven. Pre-COVID, we held an event every other Saturday where up to 500 households would show up to qualify for an $850 voucher, which is enough to fund complete smog repairs on most vehicles. Post-COVID, our event staff was forced to work from home, but we saw a remarkable increase in customer interest. We've gone from an average of 6,500 vouchers annually to we have now given out more than 21,000 in the last 11 months. And we attribute this to the ongoing economic impacts of COVID, where working families really need help to keep their vehicles on the road with valid registration tags. The Valley Air District will spend $9 million on Tune-In, Tune-Up. This fiscal year, we'll issue 22,000 vouchers. These will be redeemed for inspection, repairs, and smog certification for 15,000 cars, resulting in at least 100 tons of reductions in CO, HC, and NOx emissions. It's a labor-intensive process to do 15,000 repairs, but since these reductions are so unique, that it actually does produce a very cost-effective result. Since 2012, more than 91,000 households have access to Tune-In, Tune-Up. 90% of them are likely low-income families. 96% of them live within a zip code designated by the state of California as a disadvantaged community. So this funding is going exactly where it's needed to really help folks drive clean and save money. The Valley Air District funds Tune In, Tune Up via proceeds from an enhanced vehicle registration fee that was enacted by the state legislature to give the Valley Air District more tools to address the severe air quality challenges in the air basin. Smog repairs are a great short-term fix, but the real long-term solution is to scrap these older, dirty cars and replace them with affordable, used zero-emission vehicles. Starting in 2015, the Clean Cars for All program has offered low-income drivers a $9,500 down payment incentive to replace their older cars with used plug-in vehicles, which are commonly available for less than $15,000. So to replace the dirtiest cars with the cleanest, most reliable cars does provide an immediate benefit to working families. And Clean Cars for All has replaced more than 3,000 cars in the San Joaquin Valley over the past 6 years, using revenue from California's carbon auctions. The success of both of these smog reduction programs is due in large part to a constant process of community engagement in the neighborhoods that most need the help throughout the San Joaquin Valley. Since these programs depend on voluntary adoption, we focus on providing intensive customer support to build trust among our target audience. And that trust is the fuel that keeps the program going and brings in the folks who most need the help. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knox, for providing that example. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here now. I know that we have resource challenges in this state, and we do not have, for example, the carbon auctions that Mr. Knox mentioned. But I believe and have talked with local air quality officials, we could stand up a program, even a pilot program, so that we can begin delivering some of this targeted to relief to the folks who need it most. And I think the sooner that we are able to do that and get it set up and underway, hopefully we can mobilize federal resources, either from the relief that's already been passed or potential additional infrastructure investments to build it up and use this again as a way to provide climate benefits, to provide health benefits, but also truly to address issues of equity and provide relief to the communities that need it the most. So it has been done, that we do have blueprints for how this can work and how we can engage local government and community members together to develop something that really provides an outstanding benefit to all in our community. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to stand for any questions that you may have, and I'm sure Mr. Knox will answer any questions that you may have specifically about the programs in the San Joaquin Valley.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Watts, for the presentation, and Mr. Knox for joining us. We do have a list of members with questions, and we will start with Assemblyman Ellison.
Who?
We can hear you.
Oh, did you say me, ma'am?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't hear because it was a buzz that went over the speaker. Mr. Watts, I got some questions on the classic autos. The classic autos that you were talking about were the ones that take, the special license plates, like Hot August Night and stuff. But those that have high insurance on their cars, like they're still classic auto, but they're still high dollar license plates, and they're personal. They're like with their names on it, not a club, this kind of thing. So would they be into this section 1 through 4? See, like I rebuild cars, and you're talking a $65,000 car versus, a smaller one or whatever, but we all have personal license plates on our cars, like a year. And that's usually the main things we do. So can you define, my first question is does that fall into this?
Thank you for the question. That's someone Allison Howard Watts for the record. So there's a few different categories that we need to talk about, right? There's personalized license plates, which are customized with, letters or numbers, as you noted. Then there are specialty license plates. There's a wide range of those, from supporting the Golden Knights to recognizing, firefighters and first responders, supporting nonprofits, etc. So the sections of the bill in 1 through 4 deal with specific types of specialty plates, and those are the classic plates called classic cars, classic rods, and old timers. Classic cars have to be at least 25 model years old or older. Classic rods, 20 years or older. Old timers, 40 years or older. Now, there are other classic designations as well. Like I said, there's street rods, which are 1949 or earlier. There's antique trucks. There's several others, but those generally they're set at a specific year and are truly vintage vehicles. What we're looking at are these vehicles that have this rolling basis where every year more model years are added to what can qualify. Now, whether you get a personalized classic plate or a regular classic plate, the provisions of those sections would apply to you. But if you're just getting if you get a wildlife plate or a Golden Knights plate or a regular Home Means Nevada plate and get it personalized with the year or any other information you want on there, the provisions of this do not apply to those types of license plates. It's specifically for a classic vehicle, classic rod, currently street rod, but I'm intending to take that out, or old timer plate.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so thank you. And then the other thing you hit in here is you're talking about the mission control. You're 300 miles from the closest place that even does these in Nevada. So the only place that do mission control is like Washoe, Vegas, this kind of stuff. These cars get drove maybe at the most in our districts, like us, it may be 3 cars shows a year within 20, 30 miles. So that's it, because the rest of the time they're in garages because of the weather. So we don't even make that 500 miles or whatever it is, 5,000 miles a year. So we probably do maybe 150 miles a year on one of them cars, them classic cars. So they wouldn't qualify into this area of the 5,000 miles at all. But the thing of it is the mission, these are high dollar cars that are being rebuilt and restored from the ground all the way up. But there's still no place in these areas that does that. Washoe and Clark, I think, is the only ones that do it. And that's the other question I have. So what do they do at that point in time?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Ellison. Howard Watts for the record. You bring up a great point, which is that we only have a smog check system in Clark and Washoe counties. Rural communities do not have, they did not get into non-attainment for air quality, so they do not have to have emissions check systems in place. This bill doesn't change that at all. I know there are some people that would like to have smog checks throughout the state. This doesn't change that at all. And if you look through the sections 1 through 4 of the bill, I specifically did not look to address this issue by requiring all classic vehicles to get smog checks. Now, they do contribute to the fund that deals with emissions control. And there's already some provisions related to that exist right now. When you first get one, you pay a fee that goes into that pollution control account. But it does not require getting a smog check, and that would not change under this. So the exemption would apply. The way that we're trying to deal with the loophole is by requiring that classic vehicle insurance. And you make a fantastic point about the amount of money that people invest and how they care for these vehicles. And usually the folks that are doing that get classic vehicle policies because they actually come with benefits like you have an appraisal. So you know if something happens to that vehicle, you know what the benefit and the payout is going to be. It's protected for if you're bringing it to shows and other events. So what I've learned in my conversations with folks in the classic car and hobby community is that it's extremely common. I won't say universal, but extremely common for folks that are putting that investment into their vehicles to have that kind of coverage. And it's also very difficult and unlikely for somebody who has basically just a commuter vehicle that's 20 years old to get that coverage as well. So that's why we're using that insurance requirement as a way to close the loophole on this program, so that the 5,000 or 6,000 true classic vehicles basically can continue business as usual, and know that there's honestly a little bit of prestige restored to the plate, because the only cars that are going to have it are the true vehicles that folks have invested their time and resources into.
Okay, thank you. And then I have one final question, if I may, ma'am. Madam Chairman.
You can go ahead.
The last one I have is, and you were talking about the smog going up, but in Washoe and Vegas, every car has to be checked. So is the smog going up or going down even with all the checks that they do? It seemed like to me they're really doing a good job at keeping control of the smog controls on these vehicles. But is the smog still going up, or is it going down?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Ellison. Howard Watts for the record. A couple of points to that. From historical heights in the 1970s, before the Clean Air Act came into effect, we've certainly seen pollution levels decrease. That said, we have continually ratcheted up our standards for clean air to try and get these pollution levels down to where no one is at risk of negative impacts for that. Also, some of the reports that I referenced compare Clark and Washoe counties and their air quality to other metropolitan areas throughout the country. And so while we're not the worst and while we've seen improvement, we still have days where air quality is dangerously unhealthy, and we still have work to do in reducing our emissions. So, that's what I would say is we have made some historical progress, but we still have pollution, and there's a couple of factors to that. We continue to have more people coming in and putting more vehicles on the roads, and we're also seeing the average amount of miles driven going up. So those factors are counteracting the fact that in general, newer vehicles are more efficient and are putting out less pollution. So there's a lot of different factors at play in the pollution that's coming from our vehicles.
Thank you very much. Thank you for answering them questions.
Next up, we have Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assemblyman Ellison asked my question about the population cap, and thank you for making sure that the rules are not changed in the rurals. So, because as the Assemblyman said, it's just impossible to get one smogged out here. But the other question I have is on the 5,000 mile reporting. When these specialty plates originally came out, that was all self-reported. I get that. And, anyone could say they drove it under 5,000 miles, but I don't believe you had to put an actual mileage down. So now with the new regulations that came in under, I forget the number we did it in this committee here, with the where you have to report your mileage every time you get your new registration. Wouldn't that change that to where you would have a good idea of what the mileage is on these vehicles?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Wheeler. Howard Watts for the record. I believe you're talking about the mileage data collection program, the pilot that we implemented last session. There's a couple of pieces for that. Again, the data varies. Some of it is still self-reported when folks aren't getting emissions checks for various reasons. If they're a classic vehicle is actually a good example because they're not going to get their vehicle smogged. So the way that they contribute information into that pilot program would be to self-report it. And so it goes back to the same situation that we have right now, where it's essentially numbers being put down, and then it would be up to the DMV to try and go out and do physical inspection to make sure that the numbers on the vehicle match up with the numbers that have been reported on the form. Also again, with the differences between the urban smog check systems and the lack of those in rural communities, there's a difference in how mileage are being collected and sent in at emissions check stations versus what's being self-reported as part of that pilot. So instead of trying to figure out how to effectively police all of those self-reporting forms, this bill essentially proposes to have insurers serve as kind of the enforcement mechanism.
Thank you. Well, that extra, duties of the insurers, do you see any or forecast any raise in rates because of that?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Wheeler. Howard Watts for the record. No, because these classic vehicle policies already exist. There are in fact some insurers that specialize in providing classic vehicle insurance itself. Hagerty is one, there's several. And so they already have their requirements and their process laid out, as well as their rates. And as I said, for the true hobbyists, in fact, it can be beneficial because the insurer knows how infrequently the vehicle is actually out and about and could be subject to damage or issues that would result in a claim. And so once going through that process, the insurance is often preferable for hobbyists because the premiums are better than what you get otherwise. And you also know what the benefit is if something happens because there's an appraisal. So the insurance companies already have that process in place. It's a separate policies and kind of a separate pool. And again, our classic vehicles are already in there. So if someone is unable to qualify for that coverage, they're going to have to just stick with the current coverage that they have. So it's not going to put any additional burden on them to get coverage. They're just not going to be able to have the classic plate anymore. And they're going to have to get a regular license plate and play by the same rules that everybody else does.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Roberts will be next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the presentation for the bill today. Couple questions, if I may. The first one is that, I noticed there's obviously an increase to the individual fees for the smog, but at the same time, you're reducing the years, 4-year grace period for new vehicles, and then every 2 years after. So, in reality, I guess my question is that really it would be almost less for somebody with a newer car. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Roberts. Howard Watts for the record. Yes, that is correct, although I will just note for the record that there is no biennial testing schedule proposed in this bill. So we're taking the existing 2-year and under the bill as written, moving it to a 4-year exemption for brand new vehicles. And again, the reasoning for that was to try and provide a little bit of consumer relief because these new vehicles are much less likely to develop problems that lead to failing a smog check. And so that frees up millions of dollars in consumer spending that can be used on something else, even though we know the average cost of a smog check is maybe $15 to $20 for an individual. That said, I have talked with folks in the industry and others who have concerns about the equitability of how that's applied. And I applaud you for making that point. And that's something that I'd be looking to make an adjustment on. One thing I'm considering is changing the additional 2 years to an additional 1 year. So it would just be the first 3 model years that would be exempt instead of the first 4. Again, I'm going to be working on an amendment with some of those changes, and we'll make sure to circulate it to all the members for your consideration once it's done. But I think that would potentially strike a balance between recognizing that if your vehicle is 3 years old, the chances of failing a smog are very low. So why are we going to make you get one and let you spend that money elsewhere? With the fact that it is providing benefits, particularly to people who can afford to acquire newer vehicles. So thanks for bringing that up.
I was getting kind of excited that I was only going to have to smog my Bronco every 2 years. But well, anyway, I appreciate the amendment. And then my last question would be on the remote testing. And so I think that's very innovative. I mean, we need to leverage as much of that technology as we can. I know there's several companies out there, so I applaud you for that. My question would be, I know this is only enabling language, but maybe you've had talks with company, is you'd be able to sign up and pay the fee for the annual smog. Would that be the same as what I pay at a remote sensing place? Like, so now I drive, it's $25 or 20 something dollars, and then $6 goes to the state. Would it be an equivalent charge, or would it just be a smaller fee and the fee that goes to the state? Do you know what that would look like?
Thank you for that question, Assemblyman Roberts. Howard Watts for the record. So that would essentially be developed in a regulatory process with the DMV. The provisions of this bill ensure that the state portion remains the same no matter what option people use. And I appreciate you noting how innovative and beneficial this technology could be. And essentially, the company would deploy that technology on the hunch that people would enjoy the convenience that option would provide. And so they would do that without any need for capital investment from the government, the state or local government. And, one of the ways that they could recoup that is a potential convenience fee. So it may cost you, say, $20 to get a traditional smog check, but you could opt into this system for, say, $30. And know that if you're driving on, for example, I-15, you're going to have something that's detecting your emissions. And if you drive through it in kind of this 30-day window, you're going to be all set. You don't have to do anything. You'll get a notification that your results have come in. So it could be a little bit more in exchange for the convenience, but that would be set up in the rulemaking process between the DMV and any potential company wishing to offer that service. And I will say again that it would be completely optional. So if people want to maintain doing things the way they've always done it, they can. And the idea would be that this is another option that people can use. And then we would gather all the general data on emissions that are coming as a result. And I believe we'll have some folks that can provide a little bit of additional details on that in support testimony.
Okay. Thank you very much for the answers. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the questions.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Vice Chair Watts, for bringing this bill. You were talking about how you've only been working on it for a couple of months, but I remember talking about this issue last session, and I think that it's really much needed to address the issues that we see in our state, particularly in our urban areas. Now, I appreciate, I think, the most about this bill is your thoughtfulness to the communities who would be most adversely impacted by the modifications and changes to these rules. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about the repair and replace program and whether that would have an effect of forcing people to buy new cars. If you could just go into that a little bit, and then I will have one more follow-up related to the voucher program, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you very much for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. Howard Watts for the record. And yes, I probably underplayed the amount of time that I've been working on this. I believe I checked my email recently and had conversations with Mr. Knox to learn about what was going on in San Joaquin in May of last year. So it's been quite some time that I've been trying to work on and fine tune this proposal. To your question, just to reinforce, this would be a completely voluntary program. That's how it exists in other places. So we would we would partner with community organizations to get the word out so that people know that this is available and that we're getting the message to the communities that need it most. But ultimately, this would be a voluntary program. No one's forcing you to get rid of your car. What we'd be providing is support in two areas. One, if you love your car, but you can't get it fixed so it can pass smog, we'd essentially provide a coupon so that you can get that repair made without it worsening your economic situation. And the reason that we do that is because we know it brings really important emissions benefits that are a priority for kind of our public policy. The other thing that it does is provide a voluntary incentive to help you afford that upfront cost to get a vehicle. And what we know is that the maintenance and fueling costs of especially electric vehicles, but also more efficient vehicles in general, are so much lower. So that once we can help people cross that initial barrier of being able to afford the down payment and get the price down to a point where it's manageable with payments and things, they then see the financial benefits on day one without having any kind of payback period. And as Mr. Knox noted, there are increasing, and we hope to get as many electric vehicles that are getting deployed so that there's a strong used market. And these incentives are particularly powerful with used vehicles. They make them extremely affordable and extremely accessible.
Thank you. If I may follow up, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, and the lifespan of an electric vehicle can be enormous. I know I've shared with a couple of folks that my boss bought a hybrid vehicle, and it had 200,000 miles on it before he had to replace the battery pack, spent that extra bit of money, which was less than a new transmission, and the car is still going, and his son is now the second owner of that vehicle. So there's an immense amount of lifespan in these vehicles that I think because of generationally where we are in them, we haven't explored the full extent of their lifetime on the road. My second question has to do with the other incentives available for purchasing EVs or adopting EVs, and how that would, how those would be affected by the voucher program. Can you talk about that relationship a little bit?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. Howard Watts for the record. So they stack, which is great. And if you look at the state climate strategy, one of the things that it emphasized was the need to provide so-called cash on the hood, so that when you're making that transaction, you have something that can be applied to lower the cost of, again, the down payment, those closing costs, the upfront barriers to getting into a payment plan, getting your payments to a reasonable place. And that's exactly what this proposal is aiming to create, is that upfront cash on the hood program. Another well-known incentive is the federal tax credit related to electric vehicles that provides up to $7,500. However, as a tax credit, that's something that essentially the consumer has to come up with the upfront cost and figure out how to make all of those things work, and then file for that credit on their tax return in order to gain the benefit of it. So I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it does create barriers for some folks. And so this is something that would help people that don't really necessarily benefit from the current structures that are in place, be able to get into the seat of the vehicle and then harness those additional benefits as any other driver would.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That is great. It's one of those, I think, that real arguments we've been hearing around the electric vehicle adoptions is that really the barrier to entry for both the market supply and the market demand is that cash on the hood issue. So you reach both of those in this bill, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Peters. Now we have questions from Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair Monroe Moreno, and thank you, Assemblyman Watts, for a lovely presentation, wonderful information, and a very thoughtful bill. I do have a couple of questions, and I'm going to take this from two quick questions on the consumer side, and then I have a couple of questions on the business side. On the consumer side, you're talking about the San Joaquin Valley program, which is where my mom lives. Modesto, Lodi, all those areas out there. I am curious as to how many times in the Nevada program you can fail before you're no longer able to, fail your emissions, before you can no longer come back to get an extension. And the second question would be, if we were able to institute this program and people were able to get this money for a new car to put cash on the hood, is what you said, would they have to use it for an electric or hybrid vehicle, or would they be able to use it on a lesser GHG emitting gas vehicle? Because we've talked about this before in the communities that I serve. This may be a barrier, even putting $9,000 on a vehicle, whether or not people are able to or even choose to, depending on their income status and their income limitations, want to take on loans. So if you could answer that first, and then I have another question.
Thank you very much for that question, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Howard Watts for the record. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Knox. I believe he has to leave briefly, but he could, or shortly, but he could speak a little bit to the replacement options that are available in the San Joaquin program.
Sure. So the state of California offers the Clean Cars for All program, where it has graduated incentives based on the vehicle technology. So when there's funding available, that starts at $4,000 for a standard gas-powered vehicle, goes up to $9,500 for a used plug-in vehicle. And then there's a $7,000 option for a hybrid car. We found that low-income people really gravitate toward these plug-in vehicles based on the incentive. And then they find that these plug-in vehicles are the most affordable to operate as well. So there's really a multiplying value when you get into the used plug-in vehicles, especially when you look at, in general, the prices of used vehicles have been steadily increasing over the last 10 years, but the last year, especially with COVID. And the only types of used vehicles that I've been able to find that have actually been dropping in price since COVID hit are the most common types of used plug-in vehicles. They've dropped $2,000 or $3,000 in the last year. So they're actually becoming more affordable. And so it really starts to multiply the value when low-income people are able to tap into that good of a price and that low of an operating cost.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. And again, Howard Watts for the record. I would just like to reiterate a couple of things. One is that this bill doesn't spell out the exact details of how the program would be set up. We're looking to provide the seed for it to start, and then the local governments would figure out the details of how they would want these programs to operate. So they'd be able to figure out what income qualifications to use, how they would like to tier the program, as Mr. Knox described. So you can essentially meet people where they're at by providing different levels for, and you can figure out what model year, for example, does a vehicle, how old does it have to be before it can get replaced? Then you can figure out, okay, if you get a gas vehicle, it has to be model year X or newer. And then, if you want to get a hybrid, and you can set different amounts of funding to help support people with whatever choice they make so that they have those choices. Another thing that I'll note that's really starting to pick up popularity is e-bikes. So electric powered bikes, which are, one or a couple $1,000s. So an incentive that's lower in comparison, $500 or $1,000, can make that extremely accessible to people. And depending on people's mobility situation, it can really help people get around. Now, look, I'm from Southern Nevada. I know how hot it is. And even zooming around on an electric bike might not be preferred. But the point is, you could set different incentive levels for different transportation options to meet people where they're at.
Thank you for that, Assemblyman Watts and Mr. Knox. I do appreciate that. I will make one comment and then I have my final question. And my comment would be that I would agree with those who are asking you to only suspend registration for the first 3 years. And the reason I suggest that is because it would allow a little bit more money to go into the program from those who can probably afford it, to help more people, just to boost up the dollar amount of this new program. But my next question would be to the folks who run these independent smog locations. I have one in my neighborhood. I go to this gentleman every single year. He's a single operator, and the fee changes are significant. And I think that what we're going to see is, with these significant changes in the fee structure, 6 times the amount they're paying, 25 to 150, something else was, significant changes, that we're probably going to see increases in our yearly registration or smog fees. And just wondering, how you came up with these numbers. Did you have a chance to talk to, if there's a group that represents these independent small businesses? Just from my perspective, we don't have a lot of small businesses. We have small businesses, but we're trying to keep our small businesses in our community. And I'm just concerned that these fee increases could, adversely affect our small businesses. And did you have a chance to talk to them about these fee changes? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. For the record, Howard Watts. First of all, I know that I didn't address your very first question about smog failure practices. And I believe the DMV will be on and will provide testimony in neutral, and they would probably be best to handle all of the different possibilities for what happens when a vehicle fails smog. I do know anecdotally that, so if somebody fails a smog check, right, they have a few options: get it fixed successfully and pass, try and get it fixed. And if it doesn't pass, you can get a waiver. A lot of people are also advised. So we have a 90-day restriction if you fail the smog to keep you from jumping right into a classic vehicle plate if you're eligible. But people, if that's the only option they can afford, they'll risk a term on an expired registration, or will try and get temporary moving permits in the in-between time so that they can jump over to that classic plate. And folks that know about this advise those as options. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I'd encourage you to follow up with the DMV if you want some additional details on that. To your comment about the 3 years, I appreciate that, and certainly considering and will likely include that in an adjustment to the bill. To your last point about engagement with the industry, yes, in fact, I've had ongoing conversation with folks in the industry. You're going to hear them. They're in opposition primarily to the issue that I just discussed and that you brought up in your comment. We've been talking for some time and had another conversation this morning. You'll hear from them shortly in opposition, but are working to try and balance this out. The provisions that I included to make sure that techs can travel to different locations without having to pay for a license each time is something that we did to work with the industry. Getting some of these vehicles that are currently using classic vehicles back into the smog system is something that benefits the industry as well. Again, we've got over 30,000, 5,000 or 6,000 are probably legit classic vehicles. So that puts 20-some thousand vehicles back into the emissions check system with everybody else. The adjustment in the smog fee that goes to the state for each smog check is usually passed on to the consumer. So the effect is your $15 to $20 smog check is now going to be a $20 to $25 smog check. And honestly, compared to neighboring states and other states across the country, Nevada's rates are pretty low for our emissions checks. So I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there. But it is something that I'm aware of. But again, I think it's the opportunity to have everybody contribute to a program that would deliver benefits to the people that are most in need. And to the other point of the fee for the licensing of an inspection station, I haven't heard too much on that. You know, I don't know too many people that have an annual margin of $125 in profit from their facility. But I'm open to making some adjustments as well. And again, with the suggestion you brought forward, I think we can make a little bit of adjustment while trying to maximize the resources that would come in and benefit those most in need.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Members, any other questions for the Assemblyman or Mr. Knox? Mr. Knox, I do have a question for you, and you may have touched upon this in your presentation. You had said that a lot of the lower income communities were doing the trade-off for the electric plug-in vehicles. Were there any accommodations made for their homes to accommodate that plug-in? Because I know, can you expand upon that?
Sure. One really helpful policy move the California's made is to dedicate a certain amount of our carbon revenue to disadvantaged communities to make sure that the benefits of the carbon cap and trade system would go to benefit the areas that are in the greatest need. And so the vehicle replacement program, Clean Cars for All, is limited to disadvantaged communities. So it lets us really focus on the needs of low-income families. And then in terms of home electric vehicle charging, there is also an incentive of $2,000 included with the sale of every plug-in vehicle through the program, which is good for installation of home EV chargers in most cases where there isn't a service panel replacement needed. So 75 to 80% of the homes were able to install home EV charger with the available incentive.
Also, thank you very much, Mr. Knox. Howard Watts for the record. I'd just like to add, I believe we do have some incentives for charging infrastructure in place here in Nevada through the utility. Also, I do know that we have a colleague in the other house who is working on some legislation that will involve significant investments in electric vehicle infrastructure, including public infrastructure to assist folks who may be in multifamily units or have other barriers to charging at home, to make sure that if this is an option that they want to take advantage of, that they'll have the ability to get the charging that they need to make it a reality.
Thank you both for the answer. And yes, I'm looking forward to receiving that bill from the other house once it makes it this way. Members, not seeing anyone else with questions for the Assemblyman or his co-presenter. So I am going to ask our broadcasting services staff if they have anyone in the queue who wishes to testify in favor and support of Assembly Bill 349.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 349, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 084. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please solely state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Cynthia Moore, CINTHIAMOORE, and I am the National Lead for Ecomadres, a project of Mom's Clean Air Force. Today, I'm calling in strong support of AB 349 on behalf of our over 8,000 members in Nevada. AB 349 helps improve public health. The American Lung Association's 2020 State of the Air report ranked Las Vegas number 9 in the nation for ground ozone pollution, naming vehicle emissions as the primary cause of unhealthy air days. In 2019, Las Vegas ranked number 13, which means we continue to climb on yet another bad list. More people continue to move into Las Vegas, which means more cars on the road and an increase of greenhouse gases. By reducing smog pollution from older, more polluting vehicles, we are removing toxins that clog our air and worsen heart disease, lung cancer, and asthma. This is important for vulnerable groups like older Nevadans and for children whose lungs are still developing, and for Latino families who are more likely to be exposed to air pollution. Efforts to improve our air quality are particularly important to me as a mother of a 3-year-old who has had breathing problems and the parents of 36,000 children who have asthma in Clark County. I applaud Assemblyman Watts for including a funding source for county programs that would help low-income Nevadans repair vehicles that fail smog checks or help them replace those vehicles with newer, cleaner ones. The governor's state climate strategy sets goals of reducing emissions by 20% by 2025 and 45% by 2030. We are currently behind in achieving this goal. AB 349 will help us get closer to our goals as a state. I urge you to please support AB 349. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore, and thank you for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 725. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, this is Andrew McKay, ANDREW MACKAY. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Franchised Auto Dealers Association. I would like to begin by thanking Assemblyman Watts for bringing this bill to your committee for consideration. Our association wholeheartedly supports the measure, and hopefully you guys will agree with the policy that is proposed by Mr. Watts. As he alluded to, following the 2015 legislative session, the Advisory Committee on the Control of Emissions, commonly referred to as the AM Committee, conducted an extensive study and analysis of the state's emissions testing program. And quite frankly, we're very pleased that Mr. Watts has accepted many of the recommendations, or I shouldn't say accepted, pardon me, is proposing that you guys accept and implement many of the recommendations of the study that was conducted by the AM Committee. This was a very intensive process. If memory serves me right, they held approximately 20 meetings over a period of about a year and a half. It involved an extensive number of stakeholders and folks from disparate industries. And the end product actually was something that was pretty impressive. Those folks did a tremendous job. When you look in terms of the classic car exemption, that is quite low-hanging fruit. Mr. Watts and I think discussed this even going back as recently or as long as 3 years ago. Included in this report is, and I was just looking through it, to give you an example of the abuse that's out there, there's a picture of a landscape truck with the classic plate on it, belch and smoke. There's a car, I swear that it must have been part of the streets of San Francisco from the 1970s, driven by Carl Malden. It looks like one of those. It's beat up. It's belch and smoke, and yep, as you can imagine, it has a classic vehicle plate on it. And this is going to address those issues. We have zero doubt about it. As many of our members, as you guys are aware of, they're classic car aficionados, and they truly believe that what Mr. Watts is doing is going to have a definitive impact seconds. For the positive. Oh, am I out of time, Madam Chair?
30 seconds.
You're right at 30 seconds.
Oh, I'll get in 30 seconds. With respect to the change in the frequency on new vehicles, we fully support what's drafted. Just by way of reference, the average exemption age for new vehicles for the first emissions test in the Western U.S. is 4.5 years. And frankly, the fail rate on these vehicles is less than 1%. I know I'm out of time, Madam Chair. Again, thank you for the time and members of the committee, and we encourage your passage of this measure.
Thank you so much, Mr. McKay, for joining us today and your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 753. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the members of the committee. This is Dr. Mary House, spelled Maryhouse. I am the president and CEO of CHR and the First Lady of Mountaintop Faith Ministries. I am here today to support Assembly Bill 349. I have long been a strong supporter of clean energy and policies that protect Nevadans' health and financial well-being. I do my best to lead by example. Our church is one of the first Black churches in Southern Nevada to be powered by solar energy. I am also a proud owner of an electric vehicle, which is a Hyundai Ioniq. So I know the health and economic benefits of clean energy technologies firsthand. I also know how these options can be out of reach for many of our communities without specific programs to help them. Sadly, Black children are 5 times as likely to be hospitalized from asthma than white children, and Black Americans are almost 3 times more likely to die from asthma-related causes than non-Hispanic white population. No child or community leader should suffer when this cause is entirely preventable. AB 349 will go a long way in getting some of the worst polluting cars off the roads and out of the communities where our children and grandchildren live and play. As an EV driver, I know that electric vehicles are a better option, and I want to increase access to them for our communities. My car needs less maintenance and servicing, saving me more time and money. That's why I am so excited about the Repair and Replace program. Will specifically help low-income drivers buy these cleaner and affordable to operate cars. I am a mother of 2 and a grandmother of 2, and I worry about my grandchildren's future. We must do what we can to address climate change and poor air quality because the problem is here now. Otherwise, what kind of world are we leaving for our children? Thank you for your consideration of AB 349.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. House. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 822. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Monroe Moreno and members of the Assembly Growth and Infrastructure Committee. My name is Matt Rubin, MattRubin. I'm an energy policy analyst for Western Resource Advocates. WRA is a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting the West's land, air, and water. WRA supports Assembly Bill 349 and its effort to close the classic car loophole from vehicles that have failed their smog test and do not meet the stricter definitions of old-timer, street rod, classic rod, or classic vehicle, as laid out in this bill. Nevada has historically struggled with poor air quality. Clark and Washoe counties have both received an F in the American Lung Association's most recent State of the Air report. The ALA further lists children, teens, seniors, those with existing respiratory diseases, and anyone who works or recreates outdoors as vulnerable groups to smog pollution. Smog and other air pollutants can exacerbate respiratory and cardiovascular ailments and can even lead to premature death. Poor air quality can damage Nevada's outdoor economy by deterring visitors, hurting both business and tax revenue. Nevada can reduce the number of vehicles on the road that have failed the smog test by requiring drivers to maintain classic or antique car insurance in order to receive a vintage plate, as laid out in this bill. Drivers that do not meet the standards would have to repair their vehicle to meet standards or else risk cancellation of their vehicle's registration. Thus, in order to improve air quality, WRA urges members of the committee to support AB 349. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rubin, for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 809. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Melissa Ramos, Melissa, Ramos, Ramos, and I serve as the Clean Air Advocacy Manager for the American Lung Association. The American Lung Association is a leading organization working to save lives by improving lung health and preventing lung disease through education, advocacy, and research. We support AB 349, which will set Nevada on a path to cleaner and healthier air by addressing transportation pollution. The transportation sector continues to be the leading cause for air pollution, which can cause asthma attacks, heart and lung disease, respiratory and developmental harm, and in some cases, premature death. These health risks are heightened even more for our most vulnerable population, including low-income communities of color, children, and seniors. Our annual report, State of the Air 2020, found Nevada is faced with some of the most difficult air quality challenges across the country. Las Vegas ranked 9th most ozone-polluted city in the U.S. and 25th for particle pollution. Reno also ranked 23rd for most particle pollution days. Currently, 2.8 million Nevada residents are living in counties with unhealthy air. While there has been significant progress to improve air quality, climate-driven factors like extreme heat and wildfires have made it increasingly difficult to clean up air pollution. Climate change also exacerbates transportation pollution, and closing the classic car loophole is an important measure to ensure the most polluting vehicles are subject to passing a smog check or to get them off the road. AB 349 will also reduce harmful tailpipe emissions by investing in state air quality programs to create a repair-replace program for vehicle owners and delay initial smog check requirements for newer vehicles. This legislation is critical to safeguard Nevadans from breathing in unhealthy, polluted air, especially for those most impacted by pollution from older, higher polluting vehicles currently avoiding the smog check program. As a representative of the American Lung Association, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my comments, and I encourage you all to review our submitted letter in partnership with other health organizations, which should be available as an exhibit. We urge the committee to vote in favor of AB 349, which will have widespread support for our climate, air quality, and our health. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today and with that information. We appreciate it. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 451. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Ramiro Reyes, Ramiroreyes, and I am here today on behalf of Chispa, Nevada. Chispa, Nevada is building political power for Latinx families so that we have a say in environmental decision-making. One of our community members' top environmental concerns is Nevada's poor air quality. Our community is worried about smog pollution getting worse, making it harder for them and their kids to spend time outdoors and making allergies worse. For people of color, for older community members, and for children, air pollution has serious health consequences from asthma to cardiovascular disease to cancer. For Black and Indigenous people and families of color who have been forced to live in neighborhoods next to sources of pollution like highways, airports, or industrial centers, breathing unhealthy air can also take other tolls. Our communities are more likely to be underinsured or uninsured. We can't afford more illnesses that raise our medical costs. When the cost of an inhaler has to be studied by the legislator, you know costs are too high. We also know that reducing smog means lowering pollution that is making the climate crisis worse. That is why we strongly believe that Nevada should close this loophole that allows over 2,500 cars in Clark County to use special license plates to avoid a smog check. But we cannot close this loophole without offering an alternative to community members who have older vehicles that may not be able to pass a smog check. We appreciate everything that Assemblymember Watts as described today, as far as the ideas and plans for offering financial aid so that local counties can help low-income Nevadans repair their vehicles or replace them with newer and cleaner alternatives. Chispa, Nevada believes that AB 349 can reduce smog pollution, improve public health, and fight the climate crisis while still giving community members a way to access transportation that is cleaner and better for all of our communities and ensures a healthier Nevada for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 978. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Francisco Vega, and I'm the director of the Washoe County Health District Air Quality Management Division. The Air Quality Management Division is in support of AB 349. On-road motor vehicles are the largest category of ozone precursor emissions. Preliminary air monitoring data through 2020 indicates that Washoe County will be violating the health-based National Ambient Air Quality Standards for ozone. The inspection and maintenance program is a key mechanism to ensure motor vehicles do not worsen ozone concentrations. Technology has led to cleaner, more fuel-efficient cars and SUVs. Today's vehicles are 10 to 20 times cleaner than the ones manufactured in the mid-1990s. Older vehicles tend to fail smog checks more often than newer vehicles. From the Nevada DMV 2019 Inspection and Maintenance Activity Report, 10.1% of model year 1968 to 1995 vehicles failed their initial smog check in Washoe County versus 2.2% of model year 1996 to 2020 vehicles. A classic vehicle that fails its smog check undoes the benefits gained from technology and federal tailpipe emission standards. Classic vehicle plates are disproportionately registered in Washoe and Clark counties compared to the rest of the state. The division's concern is that classic vehicle plates and associated smog check exemptions are being issued to vehicles that are driven more than 5,000 miles per year and cannot pass a smog check. The division expressed this concern through a testimony on AB2 to the Assembly Committee on Transportation in 2011. Requiring classic vehicle insurance as a condition of classic vehicle registration can close that loophole, remove the smog check exemption currently allowed to non-classic vehicles, and help the air quality in Washoe County. I would like to thank Assemblyman Watts for engaging with the Health District earlier this summer. We've been looking forward to this legislation like this for quite some time, and this is a priority for the division. We know this is years in the making and a lot of hard work. Again, the AQMD is in support of AB 349, and I'm available for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Vega. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 242. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Danielle Moreno, and members of the committee. My name is Reverend Leonard Jackson. That's spelled Leonard Jackson. And I am the director of the Faith Organizing Alliance. And I'm here today to show support for Assembly Bill 349. At Faith Organizing Alliance, we're trying to solve a lot of issues with Nevada's transportation system. Transportation impacts every aspect of our day-to-day lives, from how we get to work, how we go to the grocery store, visit the doctor, to even the very air that we breathe. Yet not all members of our community have the same access and ease of mobility as others, and we do not bear the burden of air pollution the same way. One of the ways we think we can address this is by reducing pollution that comes from vehicles, to reduce contamination that is making our community sick. As many of you know, we've been supportive of clean energy and cleaner vehicles that will protect our environment and our air quality. We want to understand how we can begin to provide communities with cleaner vehicles. But there's no funding source for that right now. The state climate strategy says we need to reduce emissions from transportation, the number one source of carbon emissions. It includes several ideas from now to do that, including closing the smog check loophole that allows cars that can't pass a smog inspection to avoid one by getting specialty license plates. It also calls for incentives specifically aimed at making electric vehicles more accessible to lower income communities. That's why AB 349 is important to us, because not only will it close that loophole, but also taking steps to make sure that we're not just denying the Bidens with older vehicles the use of their cars, but providing funding for them to make their cleaner vehicles or to get a clean air car. This will help protect folks who are driving older vehicles that may be more polluting, but that cannot afford to get them fixed. It will help increase access to cleaner technology and clean up our air. I thank you in advance for your consideration of AB 349, and I urge you with all my heart and soul and the future of our children are dependent upon you to support this important legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Jackson, for joining us and for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 525. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Richard Beckstead, spelled Richard Beckstead, and I'm a Principal Air Quality Specialist from Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability. Clark County is in support of Assembly Bill 349. Clark County has been designated non-attainment for ozone standards. On-road members, on-road emissions from motor vehicles are a large portion of the ozone precursors. Older vehicles emit significantly high emissions on a per mile basis than newer cars. Older vehicles also fail emission tests at a much higher rate than new cars. This bill addresses Clark County's concern that a significant number of classic vehicles are bypassing emission testing. Requiring classic vehicle insurance will prevent grossly polluting vehicles from avoiding smog checks and result in reducing air pollution. Thank you for this opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 822. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Emily Duff. That's EMILYDUFF. And I'm a manager of state policy with Series, and I'm speaking in support of AB 349. Series runs the BICEP network, which is a coalition of nearly 70 major employers, leading consumer brands, and Fortune 500s, including many with operations in Nevada. Our members recognize that climate change poses a significant risk to the long-term economic success of the business community and have set goals to reduce their emissions. Just as transportation is now the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Nevada, vehicle fleets are often a substantial component of their carbon footprint as well as a major operating expense. Clean vehicles help businesses create financial savings and minimize the risks associated with fuel costs, maintenance downtime, and supply volatility. Importantly, our members and our business partners support policies that accelerate the transition to clean transportation options, not only because it helps their bottom line, but because it helps their employees, customers, and the communities they operate in. Series recently submitted a letter to the committee signed by 6 businesses and institutions, including Dignity Health, Uber, IKEA, and Patagonia, highlighting their support for legislative action that accelerates the transition to low-emission and zero-emission vehicles. In this letter, these companies called on state lawmakers to close the current vehicle emissions testing loophole in the Smog Check program. Closing this loophole would improve air quality, which will lower healthcare costs by reducing instances of respiratory illness that leads to missed days of school and work, especially for low-income and minority communities who are disproportionately impacted by air pollution. For these reasons, Series supports the passage of AB 349. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 533. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Yola Hager, Yollahager, and I'm one of the founders and current president of Hager Environmental and Atmospheric Technologies. I'm here on behalf of my company and our partner Parsons to testify in support of AB 349 and thank Assemblyman Watts. Specifically, I would like to discuss the tremendous value and benefit this bill offers Nevada citizens with remote sensing. Remote sensing technology, commonly referred to as RSD technology, is a state-of-the-art proven technology that is EPA approved for remote collection and remote of smog pollutants and can collect data from light-duty cars and heavy-duty trucks in one footprint. RSD technology is deployed in several states and is approved for use across the European Union, all with positive reviews for convenience, cost efficiency, and accuracy. This technology operates 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, unmanned, offering great convenience and cost effectiveness to the citizens of Nevada, who can voluntarily drive under the system to have their cars remotely tested. And because of its cost effectiveness, there is the potential for increased revenue generation for the state. Those whose vehicles do not receive a pass with remote sensing will not be able to opt in or will need to seek testing at a local smog shop to ensure proper repairs are made. But for those motorists who pass, it is an added value the DMV can offer citizens. And given the pandemic, this solution offers motorists who are high risk the priceless benefit of a contactless online option to smog check their cars. Lastly, I would like to add this proven technology is known to Nevada and has been utilized for the collection and reporting of state emission data to the EPA. Because remote sensing technology can detect pollutants from both light and heavy-duty vehicles, the tremendous flexibility and potential for air quality enforcement, such as with truck passing through the state, and data collection for air quality controls and requirements has been recognized. By enabling remote sensing, the state will have access to control this data, thereby eliminating the need for added collection, for added data collection, both a cost and time savings for your state agencies. Thank you for your time today, and we are extremely excited at the prospect of remote sensing in the state of Nevada.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 155. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please solely state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTICABRERA, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League. AB 349 is a priority of the Nevada Conservation Network, a diverse coalition of over 20 of our state's leading conservation and environmental groups. The Nevada Conservation Network came together around a focused set of 5 priority bills for the 2021 session, all of them strong steps for advancing conservation and the protection of Nevada's environment. AB 349 would help us make progress towards our state's ambitious goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions to reach net zero by 2050 by removing some of the dirtiest smog-producing cars from our roads and making clean energy alternatives available, we can lower Nevada's emissions and put ourselves in a better position to meet our climate goals. Nevadans overwhelmingly support bold, aggressive action that confronts the climate crisis. 82% of Nevada voters believe that climate change is a serious problem, and 70% strongly support regulations that would limit total carbon emissions in Nevada to reach our net zero goal. Nevadans are calling on legislators to prioritize pro-climate policies that will protect our environment and public health for years to come. AB 349 is a critical step in fighting the climate crisis that works to improve air quality and public health. It checks two boxes in Nevada's state climate strategy: closing the classic car loopholes and funding a program to help families make the switch to an electric vehicle. We'd like to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this important piece of legislation forward, and we strongly urge the committee's support. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 130. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS. I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, here in support of Assembly Bill 349 to close the current classic car loophole. In the interest of time, I'm just going to echo the sentiments of the people who testified before me and submit my additional comments for the record. In supporting AB 349 and actively reducing smog pollution from cars, we take further steps in the urgent fight against climate change while improving the public health in our communities. We urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments, and thank you for keeping it brief. Do we have another caller in the queue?
If you are just joining us, we are currently in support of Assembly Bill 349. If you wish to testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 200. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Bradley Mayer, BRADLEY, partner at Argentum Partners, here today testifying in support of AB 349 on behalf of the Southern Nevada Health District. While the Southern Nevada Health District doesn't directly regulate air quality in Southern Nevada as it is a function of Clark County, improving vehicle emissions is a benefit to public health. We thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this bill forward and again urge your support of AB 349. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the short comments. Do we have any other callers in the queue for support before we move on to opposition?
Yes, Chair, we do have one more caller in support. Caller with the last three digits of 237. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Marlene Lockard, Lockard, and I'm representing SEIU Local 1107. We are in support of this bill, and I think it's an appropriate time to say ditto to everything that has been said. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us and for your comments. Broadcast staff, do we have anyone left in support? If not, do we have anyone in opposition?
Chair, I believe we are through with support testimony. If you do wish to offer opposition testimony to Assembly Bill 349, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 845. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last two digits of 845, I can see that you are unmuted. You may begin your testimony.
If we have another caller in the queue for opposition, we can move on to that second caller and come back to the first.
Thank you, Chair. Caller with the last three digits of 160. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin your testimony. Caller with the last three digits of 160. Please press *6 to unmute and begin your testimony. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to move on to another caller, if that's okay with you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 760. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rafael Arroyo, Rafael Arroyo, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Emission Testers Council. And first of all, I'd like to say I'm in opposition to some parts of the bill, but not all. And I do appreciate Assemblyman Watts bringing this bill forward, and it has a lot of good things in it, but there are some things that I have concerns about as members of the industry. As far as the classic plate thing, we are 1,000% in support of that, and we really appreciate that he brought that forward. There's a couple of things that we do have concerns about. One is the 4-year exemption, which he mentioned that there may be some middle ground and stuff on that. But I would like to also speak to the fact that if the whole intention of this bill is to reduce emissions, and that's why all of these people are in favor of it. And we are also in favor of reducing emissions. So even though that there is a low percentage of cars that fail the emissions test that are newer, the reason that is because there's a lot more knowledge out there for people. People know not to bring their cars in to get emissions tested when they have a check engine light and they're not going to pass. So that's why you're going to see the low failure rates. And we have to remember that the name of the program is the I&M program, the Inspection and Maintenance Program. And the point of it from the beginning was to require inspections to force people to do maintenance. And most people will not do maintenance on vehicles if it's not required. And with technology nowadays, especially in the newer vehicles, there can be vehicles that are over the federal limit of pollution and the check engine light will be on, but the driver will not feel any change in drivability or performance. So they'll go 4 years without getting it fixed because why do they need to? My car drives fine. And as a member of the industry that also has emission repair stations, I will tell you that I see this on a daily basis. People are only fixing their cars in order to pass the smog because they don't want to spend the money on that. So I would say that if the goal is to reduce emissions, then I don't think less testing is the answer as far as that goes. Also, there is going to be an economic impact, obviously, to the small businesses, especially the people that Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong mentioned, that are the independent, small people. I will move on to the 2 minutes. I will move on to the self-repair portion. We did have a conversation about that, and I think that there's ways to help people with their older vehicles. And I'm in support of the program, but raising the fee to $10 is also going to really hurt a lot of the small businesses because the larger businesses are going to be able to not pass on that price to the consumer.
Mr. Aurora, we're at the end of your time. However, if you could send us your written comments, that would be helpful, and we can share that with all the members on our committee. But I thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 845. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
My name is Eric Wahrer. That's E-R-I-C, last W-A-H-R-E-R. I am the state manager for Nevada DECRA Services, Inc. We are also in support of closing the classic car loophole, but remote sensing seems to open another loophole. As I've been in the industry a long time, like Raphael had said, people know when their vehicle is going to fail. And what is to stop somebody from simply giving their license plate to a car that's going to pass that's of similar year, make, model, and having them drive it through the remote sensing, as the remote sensing does not check for VIN numbers. I just see this as kind of counterintuitive to closing the classic car loophole, as it will allow gross polluters to stay on the street as soon as people figure out that this secondary loophole is opened. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments. Do we have any other callers in the line who wish to testify in opposition of AB 349?
Yes, Chair, we have one final caller testifying in opposition. Caller with the last three digits of 160. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 160. Please press *6 to unmute to begin your testimony. Chair,
Well, we have
it appears
to
that this
get-
caller is having trouble unmuting.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to neutral. Do we have any callers in the queue to testify in the neutral position?
Madam Chair, if I may. Sorry. Madam Chair, if I may, J.D. Decker, Chief of the Compliance Enforcement Division for the Nevada DMV. It's nice to see you today and the committee. I would like to personally thank Assemblyman Watts for explaining Nevada vehicle emissions so impressively. The DMV would like to offer a friendly amendment to Vice Chair Watts, adding business purposes to the transportation activities that are prohibited for use with smog exempt plates as identified in the bill. CED doesn't feel that a vehicle used for commerce should be exempted from emission standards. They can also be some of the most blatant violators that we see. It's very hard for Nevada law enforcement in the field to determine whether a Classic Series plate is being used for general transportation, which is prohibited by the bill, which is why the mileage reporting piece is so important. But we are able to determine generally when a classic vehicle plate is attached to a vehicle being used for business. So we would invite Vice Chair Watts to discuss it offline with us if he's interested. I would also just like to be available to answer any of the questions the committee might have of DMV at this time, including our current usage of the remote sensing technologies, if that's of interest to the committee, and also circling back to the question posed by Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, if that is still pending.
You're on mute, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Decker, for your comments. And members, if you do have any questions for Mr. Decker, I encourage you to take those offline. Seeing the time of our committee today, I'm sure he will encourage that conversation. And I saw Assemblyman Watts shaking his head, so I look forward to seeing the outcomes of the conversation you have with him. Do we have a caller on the line in neutral position?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 349, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 059. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Monroe Moreno, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Kristen Averett, State Climate Policy Coordinator. That's KRISTEN AVERYT. On behalf of the Nevada Climate Initiative, I'm testifying neutral on Assembly Bill 349. The classic car loophole was one of the 17 climate mitigation policies contemplated in the state climate strategy that was released by the Nevada Climate Initiative in December of last year. The strategy did not make specific recommendations about policies that should or should not be implemented. It did, however, provide a framework that is intended to help lawmakers shape policies so they work for Nevada. As it relates to the classic vehicle loophole, the state climate strategy states the following. 1, older vehicles emit significantly more emissions on a per mile basis than newer vehicles. 2, closing the classic cars loophole will reduce tailpipe greenhouse gas emissions. 3, a policy requirement to pass an emissions test prior to obtaining a special license plate could have a negative financial impact for low-income households. And 4, closing the classic vehicle loophole could have a positive health impact, for vulnerable communities via air quality improvements. AB 349 is consistent with the state climate strategy in that it has the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and as explained by Vice Chair Watt in his opening remarks, there are provisions in the bill intended to address the financial impact to low-income households. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for joining us and for your comments. Do we have any other callers in the queue to testify in the position of neutral?
Testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 349. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 546. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Monroe Moreno and members of the committee. For the record, I am Jeffrey Kinder, Jeffrey Kinder. I am a Deputy Administrator with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, working with the division's AIR program. I am here today to testify neutral on AB 349. The classic car loophole has been a concern to Nevada's air quality agencies and the Department of Motor Vehicles since 2011. In that year, a statute change allowed vehicles that would otherwise be subject to the motor vehicle emissions testing program, but had obtained special license plates to avoid the requirement to pass an emissions test. Since then, the number of vehicles taking advantage of this loophole has grown from a few thousand in 2011 to more than 30,000 in 2020. Older vehicles emit significantly more emissions on a per mile basis than newer vehicles. In 2016, the Nevada Advisory Committee on the Control of Emissions for Motor Vehicles, commonly referred to as the I&M Committee, of which NDEP is a member, produced a report for the legislature that made recommendations to address the loophole and improve the smog testing program in general. We are glad to see that several recommendations from that report were included in Assemblyman Watts' bill. NDEP believes the measures included in Assemblyman Watts' bill will realign the statute with the original intent of the exemptions for classic vehicles. Measures in the bill that were also proposed in the 2006 I&M Committee report include increasing the testing exemption period for new vehicles from 2 to 4 years and providing the possibility of remote sensing testing of vehicles. NDEP believes these measures will reduce the regulatory burden of the program on motorists while also maintaining its air quality effectiveness. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in neutral today.
Thank you so much for joining us and for your comments. Do we have any other callers in the queue?
Chair, we have no further callers wishing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much for that. Assemblyman Watts, do you have any short closing comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, very briefly, Howard Watts for the record. I believe that we're very close to working with some of the folks who have testified in opposition and neutral to reaching a point where we can provide all the benefits that have been laid out on this bill while also addressing the concerns. We might not get everyone to 100% love the bill, but I think that we can get to a place where it's acceptable and workable for all. So I look forward to doing that and circling back around with an amendment very soon for your consideration. The only other thing I'd say, because I think so many people covered it well, is that there are some additional exhibits submitted in writing on Nellis, and just wanted to make folks aware that there's additional testimony, particularly in support, that you can find there if you're interested. And with that, I thank you for your time and consideration, and look forward to all of your support on Assembly Bill 349.
Thank you so much. And for that, we will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 349 and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 383. The measure is co-sponsored by 3 committee members, Assembly Members Watts, Brown May, and Miller. The presenters today, you're welcome to start, and hopefully this presentation will be just a little bit shorter than our last because we only have 1 hour to get through it all.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Again, for the record, Howard Watts, representing Assembly District 15 in Clark County, and I'm glad to now present Assembly Bill 383 for your consideration. I'm joined by Brian Fady with the Appliance Standards Awareness Project, or ASAP. I'll speak briefly about why I brought this bill forward and the benefits I believe it'll bring, then turn it over to Mr. Fady to provide some additional context, and we'll walk you briefly through the bill and a proposed amendment, which should be available to everyone on Nellis. The legislature and Governor Sisolak, as I've noted before, set bold goals to address climate change and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. While we often look at changes to the ways we produce energy, produce heat, or transport goods and people as ways to meet those goals, another critical piece to the puzzle is efficiency, doing the same amount of work with less. Several of the measures in the state climate strategy focus on efficiency, and AB 383 specifically addresses another one of the 17 policies evaluated by that strategy by adopting appliance and equipment efficiency standards. These policies can easily provide a wide range of benefits. They save energy and water, Nevada's most precious natural resource, in my opinion. Less energy means avoided pollution that negatively affects our climate and our health. And using less means spending less on utility bills, saving families and businesses money. We've seen local governments also realize huge savings of taxpayer dollars by switching light poles to LEDs, for example. Programs like Energy Star and WaterSense provide big returns on modest investments. And this bill builds on those initiatives and fills in the gaps where the federal government has fallen behind in setting standards. After I worked with this body to successfully pass water conservation legislation last session, I'm now bringing a similar approach to energy with Assembly Bill 383. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Fady to give a brief overview, and then I'll walk you very quickly through the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. Again, my name is Brian Fady. Last name spelled F-A-D-I-E. I'm a state policy associate with the Appliance Standards Awareness Project. And I have just a couple of slides, if that's okay, Madam Chair. We'll do a screen share here.
Okay, thank you.
And then I will begin full screen. Okay, and so today we're here to talk about appliance efficiency standards, which is a great way to save money for consumers and reduce emissions. I want to just give a very brief background on what are appliance efficiency standards, and then we'll talk about the bill specifically. My organization, Appliance Standards Awareness Project, we are a nonprofit organization that is a coalition project with a steering committee that includes consumer advocates, energy efficiency advocates, as well as utility and state agency staff. And we work to advance cost-effective appliance standards at the state and federal level. So what are appliance efficiency standards? It's setting minimum energy efficiency levels for certain residential and commercial products. Now, the federal government has set these efficiency standards for over 60 products, but states can set standards for any product that the federal government has not. And the federal government has often set these for kind of the bigger name appliances that you might think of when you hear the term appliances, your refrigerators, your washers and dryers. But there's a whole category of products that the federal government has not set standards for, and thus states can. And it's worth noting that this policy concept, it applies only to the sale of new products, not to used products. Many states have been setting appliance efficiency standards over the years, and talk just briefly about reasons why. Meeting climate goals has been a big reason why, especially as of recent when states have been adopting stronger and stronger climate goals. They've been turning to appliance efficiency standards as a way to reduce energy demand to help meet renewable energy as well as greenhouse gas reduction goals. They also create great consumer savings. We'll touch on that a little bit later. Savings for consumers, businesses, schools, and more. And then, of course, jobs, that local economies are boosted when consumers have more spending money in their pockets. Mentioned that states are taking action. Which states? 16 states over the years have actually adopted state-level appliance standards. And just since 2018, actually 8 states have adopted appliance standards. Note a number of Western states, Colorado, Washington State, Hawaii, California, and at the end there, Nevada as well. And we'll touch on that in a second here too. And then this year, 2021, 12 other states are considering standards for appliances. Again, Nevada appliance standards, wonderfully in 2019, the state set standards for certain light bulbs as well as water fixtures. And so the bill today, AB 383, is looking to cover 13 more recommended products. For those visually inclined, here are some pictures of the 13 products that are in the bill. The next slide will have them listed out, but wanted to give you a visual. We've got a list of the products here, and we're using it to talk about the utility bill savings that could be achieved by this bill. You've got a list of the products on the left-hand side of the table there, and then what you're looking at on the right side are annual utility bill savings across the state, and this is in the millions of dollars. And I would call your attention to the bottom right, where you note that by 2035, an annual savings of $29 million in utility bill savings. I'll also note that we have conducted a payback calculation where if a product does have a increase in the incremental cost of the product or meeting the standards, how long would it take for a consumer to make that up? 8 of the 13 products have less than a 2-year payback period, and 4 of those actually have no payback period, where the savings would begin right away. Appliance efficiency standards also create tremendous energy, water, and emission savings. And we're looking at a table here. These are annual savings of these different categories by 2035 for the products covered in the bill. You're looking at electricity savings of 166 gigawatt hours per year by 2035. Natural gas savings, you've got 886 billion BTUs. Water, you've got 340 million gallons. And that does not include any water saved by avoiding thermal power plant operations. And then you've got carbon dioxide as well at 130,000 metric tons. Why these products? You've got 13 products in the bill. Why these products? They meet criteria that states would want to see. For each of these, you have existing recognized technical standards that are available to adopt via reference. And this is often the Energy Star program, the Federal Energy Star program, or the California Energy Commission, or perhaps an industry standard. And this is where you see, when you look through the bill, references like commercial steam cookers shall meet the requirements of Energy Star version 1.2 or commercial steam cookers. That's how the efficiency is accomplished. These products also have good consumer choice. Multiple manufacturers are already making products meeting the proposed standards. And you're also able to confirm that there will be energy emissions and dollar savings, that market data is available, that you can see products out on the market, products that would be coming in to be more efficient, and you get a quantitative analysis of that, which is really nice. Effective date, as the Assemblyman mentioned, there's a proposed amendment coming that would set the effective date at July 1st, 2023. And that would give about 2 years for retailers, manufacturers, and others to prepare. And of course, to allow COVID to recede as well. And the last piece I'll touch on is at the very end of the bill. This is a flexible demand piece. The bill enables, but does not require, the Governor's Office of Energy to adopt flexible demand standards via the normal public notice and comment rulemaking. And what this is about, you're looking to potentially unlock the ability to reduce peak demand and provide other grid services via voluntary demand response programs. And what the conversation is around this right now, hot water heaters is the product most being talked about. What you can envision in the future is, say, 100,000 electric hot water heaters being bundled together in Southern Nevada and being able to communicate with the grid operator or perhaps a third-party vendor. And you're able to operate those so that, for example, they're not all turning on during peak demand hours. You achieve a lot of value there for the grid. California, as well as Washington State, passed this requirement in 2019. And Oregon has a bill this year that's moving through their legislature that has this flexible demand piece. Theirs is specifically for hot water heaters. Again, the bill doesn't require it, but it's an enabling piece via rulemaking. And that is it. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fady. Walking you very briefly through the bill and as well as the mock-up amendment. Sections 2 through 30 define the various appliances and other key terms that are used in the remainder of the bill. Section 31 tasks the Governor's Office of Energy with adopting standards for energy efficiency for the outlined appliances, which would have to be met by anybody offering such items for sale, lease, or installation in the state by July 1st, 2023, as amended. It also clearly sets those minimum levels for the standards for each device and allows them to be modified as the technology improves. And anytime that happens, there would be at least a 1-year grace period for manufacturers and others to adjust. Section 32 of the bill would allow the Governor's Office of Energy to adopt standards for other items moving forward as technology evolves, again, providing a 1-year grace period to prepare. All of this rulemaking would happen in a public and transparent way consistent with the Nevada Administrative Procedure Act. It's also important to note that many appliances already have standards set by the federal government, and any existing or new federal standards preempt any existing state standard. Section 33 is eliminated since it is not my or our intent to seek a waiver of any federal existing standards. The amended Section 34 clarifies how compliance essentially would work, with manufacturers providing certification that their products meet the outlined standards. Oftentimes, it's as simple as showing the existing Energy Star designation for a product. Section 35 would have allowed for independent testing and verification, but is being removed as we don't really have the capacity within the state to carry out those processes. It also lays out the process to investigate complaints of noncompliance and assess penalties for violations. And I will note that as amended, it clarifies that a first violation would not receive a civil penalty. Section 37 provides GOE the authority to set standards specifically related to flexible demand technologies, which are really smart home innovations as they continue to move forward. Water heaters were mentioned. Many of us are used to smart thermostats now, so as that technology develops, we're looking at setting standards to help spur the use of those. And Section 38 provides exemptions to the application of the standards, primarily for items that might be produced here or moved here through the supply chain, but are going to be sold outside of the state to a place that may not have our standards. Finally, I want to note, we'll hear from the Southern Nevada home builders, and I want to thank them for reaching out and providing constructive engagement on this bill. We are in disagreement, particularly about the fireplace standards, but our conversations with them have resulted in some of the proposed amendments and improved the bill. We probably have at least one or two slight technical cleanups that we want to make as well. And we'll get on those and continue to talk to the home builders to see if there's any other consensus that we can reach. And with that, thank you for your time, and we'll turn it over to any questions that members of the committee may have.
Thank you both for the presentation, and we do have a few questions. We'll start with Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Chair. So, you provided some great background on the payback period of these devices, which appears to be generally quite short. Can you quantify the actual dollar savings a family or business could see in a year by ensuring that they have some of these more efficient appliances?
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Peters. Howard Watts for the record. I'd like to turn that over to Mr. Fady because I believe they have looked at the annual savings for some of these appliances that consumers could see.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman, for the question. We have looked at that in using national average numbers for a number of the products, specifically the commercial products. You see listed, there's commercial dishwashers, commercial oven, electric steam cookers, gas fryers, hot food holding cabinets. And we see with those products some really nice annual savings. You're looking at approximately $900 in annual savings with commercial dishwashers. Again, this is using national numbers, but $170 annual savings with commercial ovens, $400 annual savings with the gas fryers, $175 annual savings with the hot food holding cabinets. And so you can see where, yes, there are tremendous annual utility bill savings that can be had. And at the homeowner level as well, you'll see those savings. And really, when you add them up across the state, that's where you start getting, even more impressive numbers. And those are dollars, again, that stay within the state and can be spent in local economies.
Thank you for those computations. I can imagine where the should go for a small business, whether it's towards enhancing pay for their employees to try and meet that $15 minimum wage standard that we'd like to see in the state of Nevada, or going back to the cost of the food or whatever it is that they're preparing so that consumers have some savings. I have one other question, Chair, if I may. Thank you. So in this space, when we're talking about efficiency standards and really battling this race to the end with climate change, becoming really this looming issue that we have to handle in such a latitude of areas, I'm a huge proponent of investing in research and development. And I think that this is one of those areas in which we have some opportunities and really should be at the forefront, particularly around water savings efficiencies and those power savings efficiencies. Can you talk a little bit about the trends we're seeing in the flexible demand technology and how standards could help spur innovation and deployment of this technology?
Thank you very much for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. Howard Watts for the record. That's a passion of mine as well, building out that new energy economy and trying to make sure that Nevada is home to innovative technologies. They're not only putting people to work and generating economic impact, but tackling some of the greatest issues that we face, from water scarcity to climate change, and having us be a hub where folks come to develop these technologies and deploy them. Flexible demand technology, again, it sounds a little bit wonky, but really it's smart building technology. We've seen over the last decade or so the change from the mercury switch thermostats to an increasing number of smart thermostats that you can adjust the schedules. They can learn from your activities, and that generates financial benefits to the consumers as well as reducing the load. We've seen NV Energy have their own system set up where during peak times they can actually raise your thermostat a couple of degrees, and that can save us money from buying expensive energy. It can reduce the need to turn on a gas peaker plant to provide high cost energy during those high demand times. So that's not the only thing that's out there. It's kind of that's what's reached that point. But water heaters are another great example. Water's being heated depending on what you have constantly. And so those are also things that as they begin to communicate, we can lower that demand and create some of those same benefits, especially as we're deploying renewable energy. Having things that we can manage that demand, especially when the sun isn't shining, for example, really pays off huge benefits. So, I think we could be a leader, one of a handful of states that starts looking into this and deploying this. And by doing that, we're not only sending a message to makers of these devices generally, but we're encouraging the innovators to come here, honestly, because we're going to be an environment that wants to help deploy that technology. And we're going to have to vet it to make sure that we're following cybersecurity and that we're delivering benefits. We're going to have to coordinate with the PUC and the utility. But I think there's a lot of different technologies that some of which we haven't dreamed up yet, but are probably innovators are trying to figure out right now that could provide some amazing benefits to consumers. And if Mr. Fady wants to add anything briefly on that, I'll pass it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I do not. That was a fantastic response. Thank you.
All right. Next question will come from Assemblyman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple questions, if I may, and thank you for a presentation and bringing this forward. I noticed the fireplace standards. I know you said you're going to be working on some changes to that, and I noticed that we adopted Canadian standards are referenced in the bill. Are there any U.S. standards that could be used?
Thank you for that question, Assemblyman Roberts. Howard Watts for the record. Canada was the leading nation in adopting stronger energy efficiency standards for fireplaces. So we don't, again, have a federal standard set here in the United States. If we did, we wouldn't need this in the first place. So we're looking to build off of that. I believe one other state here in the United States has just recently adopted those standards. So we would be adopting similar standards so that, again, there's consistency. One of the things that we are really also doing with this is trying to spur the federal government to set standards. And we don't want to have every state having its own separate standards. So when we're working on these, we are pushing for stronger standards in a sense if the feds haven't stepped in yet. But we're trying to have some uniformity that this is something that still provides lots of options, has a quick payback period, and kind of makes sense in all those different ways. And so those standards are what check that box. And I think we know how long fireplaces tend to last in a residence. They're not something that gets changed out very frequently. So those would deliver, I think, really significant savings to the homeowner over the years. And with that, if Mr. Fady has anything else to add, turn it over to him.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just briefly, Washington State was the one state that has adopted these standards. They adopted them via a building code process in their 2018 building codes there, and those have come into effect. One of the reasons for basing it off a Canadian standard is there is technical activity that needs to go into developing the standards. You want them to be technically sound, that both the efficiency standard and a testing procedure to make sure that manufacturers are achieving that efficiency standard, you want those to be technically sound. Now, you'll notice in the bill, most of the products are pegged to Energy Star or California Energy Commission standard. That's in part because it just takes resources to produce that sort of standard. And so the US EPA, California Energy Commission. They're very well resourced. It's something they've been doing for a long time, and they produce those for other products. For gas fireplaces, we turned to the department called Natural Resources Canada, which is the Canadian federal government version of the U.S. Department of Energy. And they went through that process, the laboratory process and the back and forth with industry to create the technical standard. And then Washington State adopted it afterwards. And so that was, part of the reason why you see the Canadian background there.
Okay. Thank you. And then one other question, Madam Chair, if I may. I noticed there's some enforcement portions in the bill, and I couldn't recall if you were going to take those out or not in your proposed amendment. So I apologize if I'm asking a mute question. But what's the capacity of the enforcement arm to carry out this in the outlying years? And you and I are both on Ways and Means together. I know now we've pushed the effective date out, but what do you think the physical impact might be for that?
Thank you very much for the question, Senator Roberts. Howard Watts for the record. I believe the Governor's Office of Energy will call in neutral to provide a little bit of background on that, as well as the impact of the proposed amendment, which I won't speak for them, but I believe eliminates the fiscal impact of the bill as written. And when it comes to enforcement, we're really trying to line it up with some of the work that I did on water conservation standards last session, which basically said, hey, we've got these water sense standards for these different fixtures. So anything that is within that program, you just basically, the way you can check it is, does it have the little that says water sense? And if not, then there's an issue, and you can go through local government, through the Attorney General, if there's a deceptive trade practice, to address it. And so that is what we're trying to do with this. And it didn't quite come out right in the first version of the bill. So we have some proposed language to try and get us there in the amendment. We'll probably hear some opposition from the home builders around concerns about exactly how this would work. And I've welcomed them to provide an alternative suggestion that makes sure that we do this in a way that is realistic and efficient and aligns with the intent of the bill, which again, in most cases should basically be the Office of Energy would have the ability to say, hey, is this an Energy Star product like we have established? Does it meet this one other standard that should be pretty clear to see? And there's already testing and certification processes in place. If not, then we've got an issue that would need to be addressed.
Thank you very much for the answers, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the questions.
Thank you so much. Members, are there any other questions for the presenters on this bill?
Yes, ma'am. I signed in. I don't know if you've seen my name or not.
I did not. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. For the record, John Ellison. I've got several questions, and you know, I believe technology changes every 2 years dramatically, and by adopting some standards now, 2 years are going to be out of place. And I'll give you some examples of what I'm looking at with these ovens right now. That you probably had small, tiny restaurants put in ovens 5 years ago. They're barely making it because of COVID. And with these standards here, and to replace them ovens, they're saying, oh yeah, well, you're going to save $150 a year. Well, it's going to cost you $8,000 to $10,000 to replace them. So, I mean, that's just one idea. And then I'll give you another example of what I'm talking about. Light bulbs. You got in here the fluorescents, where most people are going to LEDs because of the cost savings in the lumens of the lights. So you're saving a lot of money by getting rid of incandescent and going to get rid of the fluorescents and going to incandescent or LEDs. In here shows massive amounts of fluorescent lights, but the LEDs are 10 times more energy efficient. They put out a little more heat, but they're still more energy efficient. And remember the twisty light bulbs that they forced everybody into? Okay, them light bulbs had mercury in them. So now we had people with mercury poison trying to take these down. Now you're changing this. So the standards, is this going to be mandatory by the state? Because I'll tell you, some of the standards in here says to comply with the manufacturers. Are they even going to come into Nevada? And what about the property owners? And what about the renters that has to replace some of this equipment and they haven't had rent for over a year and a half? So how are you going to do that? So I'd like you to answer these because, I believe in the technology and what we can do to bring it up, just like you brought up the thermostats. I think it's the greatest idea. And NV Energy even stepped up to the plate with most of the people and said, hey, we'll supply some of these thermostats for you, which is great. But some of the stuff in here, I don't know if this is going to be mandatory. And if you look at the date on this, it says to become effective July 1, 2021. Well, I don't even know if half this stuff's even available. The other thing is in 2 years, this might be outdated. So could you help me understand this and where I can get into this? Because it seems like to me we're pushing other people's ideas onto private property and private people. That's my problem.
Thank you. I certainly can help you with that, Assemblyman Ellison. Howard Watts for the record. So I want to clear up any misunderstanding that you may have about the policy in this. This is not forcing anybody to replace anything. So this is not telling somebody that they need to rip out anything that's existing and replace it with something new. This is standards of what's going to be sold moving forward. So for example, when that oven goes out and somebody needs to purchase another one, we want to make sure that it's an efficient one that may cost a couple $100 more upfront, but is going to provide operating savings that'll more than make up for that over the lifetime of the appliance. And so that's the purpose of these. It's not to take any of those. You mentioned light bulbs. Again, this is setting standards for those fluorescent type of light bulbs. It is not forcing people to buy those. In fact, we already passed a lighting bill last session that assisted in pushing and promoting us into LEDs. This is making sure that if you have fluorescent lighting like we have within this building, that the bulbs that are available are higher quality and are going to save us money. So that's that. And then I think
I'm glad you mentioned that, because our company right now is we won't even put regular R40s or even T8s into light fixtures right now. We're asking the people to go ahead and invest the money, get rid of the ballast, and put the LED light bulbs in. So you're right. You're 100% correct on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Ellison. Howard Watts again for the record. And to your point about changing technology, I really appreciate that. And that's why this bill is structured to allow the Governor's Office of Energy to adjust as the technology adjusts without us constantly having to come back to the legislature and make technical fixes all the time. It's the same thing I did with the water conservation standards, so that instead of us setting extremely prescriptive things in statute that we've got to go back and revisit every 2 years as the technology changes, this will allow the state to adapt as the technology adapts. And that's something that I'm really pleased about in this bill. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, I thank you. And you answered a lot of these, because when I started looking through here and I hit section 8 or whatever, but I think my colleague jumped right in there and hit it. He's seen the same thing that I did on the fireplaces, because there's a lot of fireplaces and the older senior citizens that still have wood fireplaces, they have gas fireplaces. And it'd be impossible for them to remove them. And I'm glad you said if they do move them, then they'd have to bring them up to current standards. So I really appreciate that. And the one thing I wanted to put on the record that I didn't get to do on the last one, and I put a note up there, but I wanted to say thank you for one of the things you did do on the last bill. And I know it's not on this, but I wanted to put it on here to let you know. The insurance companies, when they do to the cars and we have to pay special insurance, you hit it on the head 100%, because they dictate how many miles we could do a year. I just want to let you know that. And I appreciate that, because that was what we needed to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that was related to another bill, but I appreciate the comment, Assemblyman Ellison. Howard Watts for the record.
Thank you for those comments and questions and answers. Any other questions on this piece of legislation before we go to the callers that are in the queue? See no other questions from the members on the committee, so I would ask our BPS staff, do we have any callers in the queue to testify in support of Assembly Bill 383?
Testify in support of Assembly Bill 383. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 523. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mel Hall Crawford. For the record, MELHALL Crawford, CRAWFORD. I am the Director of Energy Programs at the Consumer Federation of America. By way of background, CFA is an association of more than 250 nonprofit organizations from across the country, including Nevada, that was established in 1968 to advance the consumer interest through research, advocacy, and education. We've long been supporters of cost-effective energy efficiency policies and programs for several decades because simply they save consumers money on their utility bills, and in addition, they help mitigate climate change. I appreciate this opportunity to speak in favor of AB 383. It includes both consumer and commercial products. I'd like to quickly reiterate what's already been pointed out. It will save Nevadans $29 million annually by 2035. And again, it will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, about 1 million tons of carbon dioxide from the air by 2035. One point I'd like to make is that low-income households, especially those who are renters, will benefit through more efficient appliances as, when needed, landlords will replace less efficient appliances with more efficient ones that meet standards. Data provided by the Low Income Housing Coalition indicates that 21% of Nevada rental households fall into the low income category. Whoever is paying the bill, the renter or the landlord, will benefit through lower bills as a result of efficiency standards. In closing, approval of AB 383 will cut unnecessary energy and water waste, save consumers money and businesses as well, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. CFA urges you to act favorably on this legislation. It would demonstrate Nevada's commitment to boosting its economy through lowering utility bills and saving energy and water. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us and for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 014. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Stephen Berry, STEVENBERRY. I am a volunteer member of the Sierra Club Legislative Committee. On behalf of the Sierra Club and our 40,000 members and supporters in Nevada, I speak in strong support of AB 383. Nevada is on the front lines of the climate crisis, with the fastest warming city in the nation, an ongoing air quality crisis, and decades-long drought. Our state has made great strides in combating climate change with our goal for 100% renewable energy by 2050. But we also need to adopt common sense legislation that ensures we are adopting utility, production, and consumer standards that synergize to support our statewide goals. This legislation, AB 383, would establish minimum energy efficient levels for consumer products and businesses, which is essential in ensuring our end-use energy consumption is as efficient as possible in Nevada. The standards outlined in this bill do not impact appliances that are currently installed, but rather they will provide for affordable, highly efficient options to be available when business and individuals need to replace their current systems. The proposed standards were also carefully selected based on product availability, cost effectiveness, established and proven test procedures, and replicability with other states. We would like to thank Assemblyman Howard Watts and the bill's co-sponsors for introducing this legislation to bring about state-level climate action and cost savings to Nevada. And we strongly urge you to support this essential legislation. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 665. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Chairman Monroe Moreno, Vice Chair Howard Watts, and members of the committee. My name is Charles Bell. It's CharlesBell. I am Programs Director for the Advocacy Division of Consumer Reports. We're a nonprofit organization that tests products and services and publishes Consumer Reports magazine and consumerreports.org. We are strong supporters of appliance efficiency standards, and by establishing the minimum standards for a range of priority appliances identified in AB 383, we believe that Nevada can take a major step forward in reducing energy and water use and at the same time generate substantial financial savings for consumers and for businesses. We believe that appliance efficiency standards are very much in the public interest because of their contribution to reducing pollution and protecting public health from the ill effects of air pollution. But they're also very much in the consumer interest because of lower lifetime operating costs for products and reduced utility bills. As Mel Hall Crawford had said, Nevada could save as much as $29 million a year in utility bill savings by 2036, which is very significant for the state's ratepayers. Just the air purifier standards alone would help reduce utility bills by about $30 per year for the average Nevada consumer, or about $270 over the life of the product over 9 years. And we think it's particularly important that standards apply to products like air purifiers, for which demand is growing about 45% over a 5-year period. And some of these products can use as much energy per year as a refrigerator. So it is very important that we make sure that they're efficient and they're affordable, and that consumers will have a wide range of choices for efficient products. So for all these reasons, Consumer Reports is a strong supporter of AB 383, and we urge you to please co-sponsor and vote yes on this important bill, and we commend you for your leadership in introducing and discussing this bill.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 450. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Hi, members of the committee. This is Angie Dykema, ANGIE-DYKEMA, and I'm a consultant for the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project based here in Nevada. Wanted to thank the committees and the bill sponsor for hearing this bill today and voice the number of reasons that SWEEP is strongly in support of appliance efficiency standards. For one, as it's already been mentioned, this bill would help address our climate crisis. As mentioned, the Nevada Climate Strategy identifies appliance efficiency standards as a critical piece to combat climate change. And according to the estimates that we've heard from the Appliance Standards Awareness Project, implementation of this bill will permanently eliminate 1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by 2035. It's a key mechanism for advancing climate protection in Nevada. Another reason we strongly support this bill is that it would deliver significant utility bill savings for all Nevadans. As was just stated in previous testimony, consumers would save up to $29 million a year on utility bills by 2035. And this is all money that would be put back into the local economy, strengthening restaurants, businesses, and stores, and it would have a ripple effect of economic stimulus. And by 2035, Nevada will save $4.30 in energy bills for every additional dollar invested in more efficient products. So in addition to that, many states, 15 other states, have already considered legislation to adopt and update appliance efficiency standards, and Nevada doesn't want to be left behind, especially with our climate goals. We want to promote energy affordability, protect consumers, and this is a perfect way of doing so. I also want to bring attention to a support letter that's uploaded under the exhibits on Nellis by 15, it's a sign-on letter in support by 15 different businesses, including Schneider Electric, the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, Field, Consumer Report, Patagonia, and a number of others. Thank you very much, and we thank Assemblyman Watts and the bill's co-sponsors for the leadership in bringing this bill forward, and strongly urge the committee to support and advance this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller.
Chair, we have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you so much. Do we have any callers who wish to testify in opposition?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 389, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 184. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Moreno and committee members. My name is Matt Walker, M-A-T-T-W-A-L-K-E-R, and I'm testifying in opposition of Assembly Bill 383 today on behalf of Southern Nevada homebuilders. As we've mentioned to the bill sponsor, many of you and state regulators, Southern Nevada homebuilders supports the state climate goals and just simply asks to be at the table when the rubber hits the road on different measures that may impact the built environment. And I can definitely say that Assemblyman Watts has checked that box. He has been readily available, and Mr. Fady and others have been quick to answer questions and kick around additional concepts, and we're greatly appreciative of that. I simply want to draw the committee's attention to 2 elements that we hope to continue working with the sponsor to resolve. The first is the fact that the fireplace standards that reference the Canadian standard deviate from the state of Washington's adoption language a bit, in that they don't reference an ANSI standard or other corresponding international standard that would not only make compliance easier, but also make custom work that needs to be field certified easier to be certified under the standard. And that's super important for Southern Nevada's economy, where we see gaming, restaurants, and other kind of exciting venues do one-off projects that require that type of certification. I think it's really important to make that work. Additionally, the new sections that deal with manufacturers proactively registering their products with the state. The homebuilders have significant concerns that because of the size of our market, that manufacturers simply will make less products available or not bother to register them, whereas something that proactively allows them to list to an international standard allows for a developer or other end user to certify compliance on their behalf instead of relying simply on the availability of product that the manufacturer has reached out to the regulator and proactively registered. So we look forward to continuing to work with Mr. Watts, and I appreciate the committee's time to hear our concerns.
Thank you so much for your comments. Do we have any other callers in the queue who wish to testify in opposition?
Yes, Chair. Caller with the last 3 digits of 061. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
My name is Jordan Cranebuell, JORDANKRAHENBUHL. I am the Executive Director for the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of Nevada. I am speaking against AB 383. The Uniform Plumbing Code and Uniform Mechanical Code, Chapter 3, require that all products be listed and labeled by a listing agency to a nationally recognized standard. Standards for products are developed by nationally recognized criteria. Listing agencies also have criteria they have to adhere to. AB 383, Section 31 indicates the director shall adopt standards and methods of verifying whether a regulated appliance complies with the standard. Section 34 indicates the manufacturers have to certify to the director that the appliances are in compliance. In our opinion, this puts the director in the position of a listing agency. the wording on fireplaces is particularly problematic. We would be happy to be involved in the future discussions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments. Do we have any other callers who wish to testify in opposition?
Chair, we have no more callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Perfect, thank you. Do we have any callers in the queue who wish to testify in the neutral on Assembly Bill 383?
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 383, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 094, please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chairwoman Monroe Moreno. This is David Bobstein with the Governor's Office of Energy. I appreciate that the hour is getting late, so I'll try to be brief here, but do want to explain sort of our perspectives on the bill. I want to begin by thanking sponsor Vice Chair Watts for working on this concept with our office from the very beginning and being so inclusive, as has been made clear by others who have testified so far in this process. Yes, appliance standards are included in the Nevada Climate Strategy, and we look forward to their being able to reduce the energy burden faced by so many of our citizens while at the same time cleaning our air and helping us meet our climate goals. We are neutral on AB 383 as written, out of concern with some of the implementation details that have been discussed quite thoroughly during this hearing. We are also, I do want to note, working on a fiscal note for the bill. But again, this is as the bill is written. We're very much appreciative and supportive of the sponsor's amendment that was proposed this afternoon, and just wanted to let the committee know that should the bill progress with the amendment, because of the amendment and also with our anticipated workload opening up a little bit with the hoped for sunsetting of the Green Building Tax Abatement Program, we will be able to remove that fiscal note and go forward. I want to particularly express our excitement about Section 37, the flexible demand technologies. It's important to note that subsection 3C, the need for our office to consult with the Public Utilities Commission, we take that responsibility very seriously, working with both the Commission and NV Energy in particular, recognizing that the PUC is ultimately responsible for the deployment of these technologies, sensitive to rate impacts, and all of the implementation details. But we would be playing a very defined role solely on the technology certification side. It is, as was discussed by Assemblyman Peters with her questioning and sponsor Assemblyman Watts, a very exciting area for the future, both for consumers and for innovation in this state, the possibility of what comes next with the electrical grid when it comes to flexible load technologies. Also appreciated the Assemblyman pointing out that our regulations are based on, certainly are promulgated in accordance with the APA, Administrative Procedures Act. We have lots of experience working with these regulations, as has been noted, when it comes to light bulbs. So with that, Madam Chair, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you so much for your comments. I'm not seeing any members with questions. Do we have any other callers in the queue to testify in neutral?
Yes, Chair. Caller with the last 3 digits of 704. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Marie Steele, MARIE STEELE, and I'm here today to testify in the neutral position on AB 383 today on behalf of NV Energy. We are reviewing the amendment put forth by the bill's sponsor, Vice Chair Watts, and look forward to continuing to work with the Vice Chair and the Governor's Office of Energy on such an important topic that will help Nevada meet its forward-thinking climate goals. NV Energy has long supported improving energy efficiency in customers' homes and businesses by educating our customers on the opportunities to save energy through conservation, installing more energy-efficient appliances, and utilizing no-cost, low-cost ways to save money on their utility bills. For eligible low-income customers, we offer free AC tune-ups and are extremely proud of our new program this year that provides free energy-efficient appliances, including new refrigerators and dryers, which has been helpful to so many during this pandemic by reducing their energy consumption. We also applaud the introduction of flexible demand technologies into this concept. Flexible load, not just load reduction, will be critical to meet our climate goals going forward. And I really appreciated the conversation around this topic and am equally excited as the chair and Director Bobzian. I bring up our energy efficiency and demand response customer programs to the committee to raise awareness that these proposed appliance energy efficiency standards would inform the design of our programs and incentives going forward, just like the lighting standards put forth by this committee last session. Lastly, we look forward to working with Vice Chair Watts regarding how these regulations will be enforced, but I believe Director Bobzian's comments just recently have gone a long way in addressing some of those issues. Thank you, Chair Monroe Moreno, for the time and the opportunity today before your committee to discuss energy efficiency standards and its importance for all Nevadans. That concludes our testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Thank you for your comments. Staff, do we have any other callers in the queue who wish to testify in the neutral?
Chair, we have no more callers wishing to testify neutral on Assembly Bill 383.
Thank you so much. Assemblyman Watts, do you have any closing comments?
Yes, very briefly. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, so that folks can get on to their next committees, if applicable. Again, Howard Watts for the record. Thank you all for your time and consideration of Assembly Bill 383. As I noted earlier, we'll continue to work with some of the folks that have some technical concerns, and we'll make some adjustments. I know we did find something else in the current language that relates to plumbing, and as I noted, we already took care of plumbing fixtures in another piece of legislation, so we'll modify that, and we'll continue to talk with other folks to make technical clarifications that align the intent in a way that works for the entities. We may still have some policy disagreements at the end, but we want to make sure that the language is clear in how it will be implemented. So committed to doing that and getting back to you with any final adjustments that are needed to make sure that the bill can be implemented well. And with that, thank you again. I urge your support for Assembly Bill 383.
Thank you so much. And with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 383. And committee members, that brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. And I will ask our BPS staff if we have anyone wishing to make public comment today.
Testify with public comment. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 688. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
My name is Michael Hansen, Michael Hansen, and I seem to be in the wrong place because the agenda said that AB 379 would be discussed today. Since I've invested 2 hours plus of my life waiting for a turn to talk, I would like to at least enter my open comments on that bill. I read the bill and was completely mystified. Okay. Hello?
You can go ahead, caller. Can you hear us?
Chair, it appears that caller has hung up.
Well, let's give it just a little bit. He was on hold waiting for 2.5 hours to make his comment. Perhaps he'll call right back in.
I apologize for the interruption, Chair. It appears that he is back on the line. I will cue him up.
Madam Chairman, I've got one for you, if I may.
I have the caller on the line. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Caller with the last three digits of 688. Please press *6 to unmute. Please restate and respell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
My name is Michael Hansen, Michael Hansen. I represent myself as a citizen of the state of Nevada. I seem to have been in the wrong place because the agenda I read said that AB 379 would be discussed today, and that hasn't happened. But having invested 2+ hours of my life listening to the other bills, I'd like to put my comments in on 379, hopefully to be considered when it is brought up. I read the language of the bill several times trying to figure out what it was going to try and actually positively accomplish, and came up empty. It seems the only thing the bill does is remove the requirement to have registration tags on license plates, and also potentially not have temporary tags for new vehicles. This to me seems counterproductive, particularly towards AB 349, because it would make much easier people to drive unregistered, unsmogged, and probably uninsured vehicles with little or no fear of apprehension or other government action to get them to comply. I also do not understand what, if any, actual benefits there are to this proposal to the citizens of the state who maintain their vehicle registrations, auto insurance, and smog inspections as required by law. Thank you.
I thank you so much for staying on the line for the 2.5 hours. And AB 379 is on the agenda for Thursday, April 1st. But I thank you for joining us and sharing your comments with us today. Do we have any other callers who wish to give public comment?
Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no further callers at this time.
Thank you so much. Well, members, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Our next meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure is scheduled for Thursday, April 1st at 1:30. It will be a day we'll hear 2 bill hearings and a work session. So I will see you all on Thursday, and I wish you well as you run off to your next committee meeting. Have a great day, everyone.
Madam, one for you. Did you say that we'd probably be next Friday, we would be probably doing a hearing?
I said next Friday on the 9th, we will be doing work session.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.